Vladimir Putin. Has anybody ever heard of Vladimir Putin? Of Russia says that Biden's, and this is a quote, politically motivated persecution of his political rival is very good for Russia because it shows the rottenness of the American political system, which cannot pretend to teach others about democracy. So, you know, we talk about democracy, but the whole world is watching the persecution of a political opponent that's kicking his ass. It's an amazing thing.
This is my video update on this Sunday afternoon, December the 17th. Let's talk about some news. And things are heating up in the Red Sea. I talked about this yesterday in my video update. And since I did that video, we've had a whole bunch of articles coming out from the Collective West media, basically signaling that the Biden White House and the Pentagon, they're in discussions to do something about the Houthi attacks on vessels passing through the Red Sea. This is causing all kinds of disruptions, commercial and military. And it looks like the Pentagon, Lloyd Austin, he's trying to put together a coalition so that the Biden White House can launch some sort of operation against the Houthis. And The Economist, they have an article with the title, "A New Suez Crisis Threatens the World Economy. Global Shipping Firms Are Suspending Voyages in the Red Sea." And the Economist, they say that Iran-backed Houthi militants armed with sophisticated weapons escalate their attacks on global shipping flows. It's always Iran-backed Houthis. They always make sure to make the point that the Houthis are Iran-backed. Politico, they had an article with the title, "U.S. Weighs Strike Options to Deter Houthis from More Red Sea Attacks. The Biden administration has been reluctant to respond militarily against the Houthi attacks on commercial shipping in recent weeks for fear of provoking Iran." That's the fear. That is the fear that many have, which is that this will widen out the war. An attack in this region, in this area, will widen out the war and will inevitably bring in Iran. And that's probably what the neocons are betting on. So this is a very dangerous situation. It's also a very dangerous situation from the standpoint of some sort of false flag. That's also very possible at this moment. Something happens to one of the ships, some sort of false flag, and then the Biden White House launches some sort of an operation or some sort of a strike against the Houthis or in this region, and everything widens out. So we're going to have to keep a close eye on what is happening in the Red Sea. Things are escalating very, very quickly. And I was reading some articles talking about how Lloyd Austin is trying to put together this coalition. Let's see, which way do I want to go? Let's go this way. So they were talking about how Lloyd Austin is trying to get some of the Middle East countries together for a coalition to launch some sort of an attack against the Houthis. And they actually even have a name for this possible operation. Operation Prosperity Guardian. Operation Prosperity Guardian. Interesting name. Let's go back this way, actually. So let's talk a bit about Project Ukraine, because we have another operation that's being planned. Another counteroffensive, actually, that's being planned, according to the German publication Welt. They are reporting that the Zelensky regime is putting together another counteroffensive in the direction of Kherson, in the southern direction. So this is Zelensky's secret plan, perhaps. This is the secret plan that he was talking about when he was in Congress and he was asking for the 61 billion. So Welt says that they've seen a report, and they state that Kiev still has big plans for a counteroffensive, and these plans are underpinned by the fact, according to Welt, they say that these plans are underpinned by the fact that Ukraine still has a whole bunch of weapons that they haven't used. So they're going to make use of these weapons and launch another super duper counteroffensive that will offend me and you and everybody for a second time. another counteroffensive in pretty much the same direction. Pretty much the same direction. Not exactly Robotinho and that area, but the Krinky area, I guess you could say. The Kherson, Bridgehead, Krinky area, which is not going so well for the Ukraine military at the moment, this bridgehead over the river. But that appears to be the secret plan that the German publication Welt has seen. Doesn't sound like it's so secret anymore. But Welt, they say that Ukraine is probably gathering resources for a new counteroffensive next year, according to an expert, adding that Kiev may begin the new push in the Kherson area and attempt to cross the Dnieper River in force. So I guess this is a report, and then Welt went to an expert, or I'm not sure what's going on, how Welt is getting this information. But they say an expert told them that Ukraine is probably gathering resources for a new counteroffensive next year. Probably, maybe, perhaps, possibly gathering resources for a new counteroffensive. Meanwhile, the report noted that Ukraine still has big plans, explaining that those aspirations are evidenced by Kiev's wish list submitted to the U.S., which includes attack helicopters, advanced fighter jets, long-range missile systems, Abrams tanks, and other equipment. In an interview with the German daily Nico Lange, a former German defense official who is now a senior fellow at the Munich Security Conference, suggested that despite the growing pessimism in the West about Ukraine's progress on the battlefield, Kiev still maintains a decent amount of military equipment with more deliveries expected to arrive from the West. All right, so got it. There's a report out there which says that Ukraine has big plans for the next year because they've put together some sort of wish list of weapons. And then you have this think tanker at the Munich Security Conference saying that there shouldn't be pessimism in and around Project Ukraine, because this think tanker confirms that Ukraine still has a bunch of weapons lying around, and probably this is going to be a big counteroffensive for the next year. I mean, this is what it seems like Welt is trying to tell everybody. Doesn't sound like this is very well thought out or very official, but I imagine Welt is just putting this together in order to con the politicians in the collective West to give more money to Zelensky. 61 billion from the US, 50 billion from the EU. I think that's what this is all about. Whenever you you have the words probably. Ukraine is probably gathering resources for a new counteroffensive. They have some weapons lying around. They still have weapons lying around. Don't be so pessimistic. And then they put all that information together. They get a think tanker as well to give a statement. They put all this information together and they say, yeah, this could amount to a counteroffensive. And then they have a wish list. A wish list. You know, Ukraine definitely has a wish list. That's for sure. They have a wish list. 17 million ammunition shells, right? Isn't that what Zelensky requested from Austin? 17 million. Like all the ammo in the entire world is what he asked Lloyd Austin for a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, they have a wish list. We want 500 F-16s and 300 Leopards and 200 Abrams and laser guns and the Death Star, and just give us everything. just give us a whole army. Give us a whole army, and then we'll get to another counteroffensive. So that's the article from Welt, and that's what's going on. All of this is just about trying to secure the what will probably be the last money, big amounts of money going to Project Ukraine. And it is a lot of money, 61 billion plus 50 billion. That's a lot. That is a lot. It's going to buy a lot of homes for a lot of people. It's going to buy a lot of football clubs for a lot of people. That's for sure. Check out this tweet from Zlati71. There's a famous Russian joke. Never give up. Go on embarrassing yourself till the end. This quote is appropriate for this situation, referencing the reports that Zelensky plans a new counteroffensive in 2022, according to Welt. So this is all Zelensky's plan, huh? Maybe this is being done. Maybe this report is being put out there in order to embarrass Zelensky. Maybe. That's a possibility as well. So the BBC, they are reporting that Ukraine is suffering shell hunger, is what they're calling it. An alarming shortage of ammunition shells. And it's forcing Ukraine to limit its firing. So keep that in mind. Keep what I just said in mind as I read you, as we discuss the next story from a German publication, this time from Bild, which is reporting that Ukraine is definitely drawing up a new plan, but it has nothing to do with another super duper counteroffensive. According to Bild, Kiev has shelled plans to push Russia out of the territories it claims as its own, and instead focusing on inflicting maximum losses on Moscow. Our goal is to have the kill ratio as positive as possible, an unnamed officer told Bild, adding that if Kiev achieved a ratio of losses of 10-1 in its favor, it would advance, while a ratio of 1-1 would ultimately mean retreat. Another source was quoted as saying that Kiev's positions are irrelevant. The main thing is that most Ukrainians stay alive, an unnamed former Western military expert told Bild, that what we are experiencing is basically a controlled rear guard action. So basically, Bild is saying that the new plan, the new strategy, it's not going to be a super duper counteroffensive as Welt is reporting, but the strategy is going to be to grind the Russian military down. 10-1 is what they're saying. They want to achieve a 10-1 ratio. How are they going to pull this off with ammunition shortages and with shortages in soldiers? They don't have soldiers. They don't have the military left to take on the Russians in this manner, to inflict a 10-to-1 ratio. And I find it interesting that they say if the ratio is 1-to-1, then that's bad news for us. Well, what if it's in favor of the Russians? What does that then mean for the Ukraine military? They don't seem to get to that. They just say if the ratio is 10-to-1 in Ukraine's favor, then Ukraine will be able to advance. But a 1-to-1 would ultimately mean retreat. What if it's 10-to-1 in Russia's favor, which is much more plausible, much more logical, given the fact that Russia probably has a 10-to-1 advantage. Who knows, maybe even more when it comes to ammunition and artillery and missiles and just about any weapon. I would imagine that the numbers are much more in favor of Russia, not only in weapons and artillery and ammunition, but also in troops, in soldiers. The numbers are in favor of Russia. So, interesting articles coming from German media. I guess they're employing the hope strategy as they put together these articles about Ukraine's big secret, super secret plans for 2024. One article is saying that Ukraine's going to go on the offensive, another counteroffensive. The other article is saying that Ukraine's going to take more of a defensive position and grind the Russians down, achieving a 10-to-1 advantage. I don't know. They're just making stuff up. They're just making stuff up, man. That's it. That is it. So I believe the Lieutenant General, Mr. Aguto, from the United States, I believe he is now in Kiev. There are photos of him with Zaluzhny. So it looks like he's now in Ukraine and ready to command the Zelensky forces onto victory. Is that his role, or is he there to babysit and make sure that the Ukraine military does as NATO and the United States commands it to do? Or is the U.S. general there to eventually sign the capitulation terms, the surrender terms? I think that's probably where this is heading towards. The New York Times, they put out an article with the title, "People Snatchers, Ukraine's Recruiters Use Harsh Tactics to Fill Ranks. Ukrainian men are reporting incidents of wrongful draft notices, unprofessional medical commissions, and coercive mobilization tactics." People Snatchers, in single quotes from the New York Times. So we know what this article's about. It's about what we've been talking about on this channel for weeks now, which is that Ukraine is trying to find military-aged men, if there are any, trying to find teenagers, trying to get women, trying to get pensioners, trying to get whoever they can to the front lines. And now the New York Times is finally admitting that is what is indeed going on in Ukraine. People Snatchers. Reminds me of the movie Invasion of the Body Snatchers, huh? That's what the New York Times is referencing in this title. Invasion of the Body Snatchers. That is what the movie is called, right? Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And I believe it starred, help me out, everybody. Who was in that movie? Invasion of the Body Snatchers, a 1956 American science fiction horror film. Who starred in that movie? I remember a movie in the Donald Sutherland in 1978, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Okay, so it was a remake of the 1958 movie. Okay, 1956 movie. And then in 1978, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, starring Donald Sutherland and Jeff Goldblum. Yeah, I remember that horror film. Classic horror film. Classic horror movie. So that's what the New York Times is referencing in this article. Lord Bebo put up a video on Twitter from the Ukraine military where they're actually trying to get husbands and wives to the front lines. Like they're trying to convince like the wives that have their husbands on the front lines. They're trying to convince the wives now to go to the front lines and to reunite with their husbands so that they can fight together as a family. Pretty shocking stuff, I have to admit. Pretty shocking stuff. And the New York Times, they also put out an article the other day with the title, Ukrainian Marines on a Suicide Mission in Crossing the Dnipro River. So in this article, this is talking about Krinky and Kherson and the bridgehead that they were trying to create. And this article basically admits that there was no tactical, strategic game plan with this bridgehead across the river. There really was no value, strategic, tactical value in sending the Ukraine military across the river to try and create a bridgehead. And this was just basically for media optics, for the Zelensky regime to get media optics as he was looking for money. And the soldiers that were sent on this mission and the soldiers that survived this mission, they basically said that this was just a suicide mission. Suicide mission in single quotes. That's the title from the New York Times. That also must be a movie title. There must be a movie title called Suicide Mission. But yeah, that is what the New York Times is admitting. They're coming clean. The New York Times is coming clean a lot now, huh? Suicide Mission, people snatchers. So yeah, the whole Krinky bridgehead. They're going to get this bridgehead in Kherson, and they're going to use this bridgehead to then make their way to Crimea. One big lie. One big lie. Not only was it a lie, it's the Zelensky regime knowingly sending its military to its annihilation, just so the Zelensky regime can get the headlines of a possible Ukraine offensive in Kherson, or the counteroffensive has not ended because, look, Ukraine's building a bridgehead. The Zelensky regime used these soldiers so as to not admit that the counteroffensive had indeed failed, and so that the Zelensky regime can then travel around the world and drum up more money. It's pretty effing sick, if you ask me. But that's the New York Times. That is the New York Times. Soldiers frustrated by positive reports from Ukrainian officials break their silence, describing the effort as brutalizing and ultimately futile. See what that sentence is saying? positive reports. Counteroffensive is not over. Ukraine's building a bridgehead. Actually, the New York Times, when I was in Athens, I remember talking about a New York Times article which actually said, yeah, I was at the law university in Athens. The New York Times article actually said that the counteroffensive is not over because Ukraine is building a bridgehead in this area in Kherson, across the river, in this area in Kherson, and this bridgehead has the potential of eventually turning into an offensive that reaches Crimea. I remember that article from the New York Times. That was like 2 weeks ago. And now you have the New York Times saying that this was a suicide mission. And it was just positive spin from the Zelensky regime, knowing that that this mission wasn't going to amount to anything, except for the annihilation of the soldiers that actually got sent across the river to create this bridgehead. Incredible stuff, man. Incredible stuff. So, how am I doing on time? All right, I'm going to probably make this video a bit shorter today. It is a Sunday, and we'll try to keep this video to 30 minutes for this Sunday. Germany is saying that they're going to bring back military service. They're considering bringing back military service. They scrapped conscription in 2011, and the German defense minister, Pistorius, said that that was a mistake in hindsight. All right. Germany is thinking what? That they're gonna be the next country to eventually take on Russia? Is that what Germany's thinking? Interesting news there. We had an interview of Putin and Pavel Zarubin, who seems to be Putin's favorite journalist. He interviewed Putin and he asked Putin about the narrative that Russia's going to invade NATO, Biden's narrative that Russia, after Ukraine, Russia is going to take over all of Europe. And Putin said that this narrative is nonsense. That's what Putin said. He said it's nonsense. He actually said that the Biden White House knows it's nonsense, but they need to make up excuses and narratives because they lost the conflict in Ukraine. He didn't say that. They miscalculated. I think he said they miscalculated the conflict in Ukraine. They didn't get it right, and so now they're having to search for excuses and for different narratives and stories. And Putin's like, this is nonsense. Russia's not going to take over all of Europe. Actually, Putin even said that Russia doesn't even have a problem with NATO countries or countries in Europe. Russia has a problem when NATO moves towards Russia. That's when Russia has a problem. So that was Putin's response. Putin actually said that as an example of NATO moving closer to Russia, and that's when Russia has problems, he used as an example Finland. He said, look, we don't move towards NATO, and NATO should not move towards us. But he's like, NATO just doesn't seem to get the message. For example, Finland. And he's like, now Finland is being built up. There's a big military build up in Finland. And Putin said, we will now create the Leningrad military district in order to respond to the NATO military buildup in Finland. So that was Putin's response to the Biden White House's ridiculous narrative that Russia's going to take over NATO. And speaking of NATO, before I get to my clown world, I'm going to try to get to my clown world. Today's clown world is, I'm not going to really get into too many details for today's clown world, to be quite honest. But the Congress, they approved a measure the other day aimed at preventing any U.S. president from unilaterally withdrawing the United States from NATO without congressional approval. And according to the Washington Post, the passage came amid concerns that Donald Trump may try to exit the alliance if he returns to office. Boy, do they fear the orange man. They really, really fear the orange man. And more than a fear of the orange man, it shows that they fear some sort of NATO breakup. Because if NATO dissolves, then a whole lot of money goes away with NATO, and they don't want that. They definitely don't want that. The politicians, the military-industrial complex. So it's also an indication that they believe that Trump is going to be president, actually, for them to resort to this type of move. It means that they're starting to come around to the realization that Trump's going to be president. And Trump gave a speech, a rally in New Hampshire, and boy, did he lay into Biden. He said Biden is a low IQ individual. He is truly the worst, most incompetent, and most corrupt president in the history of our country. I'm not going to argue with you there, Mr. Trump. That's for sure. He also said that this is an interesting part of his speech, which I'm sure is going to cause many heads in the deep state and the globalist class to explode. Trump also said that Putin is making fun of the Biden White House and the United States because Putin, and this is true, Putin is saying what kind of democracy is the United States? What kind of legal system does the United States have when the president, the current government, goes after the main competition? What kind of democracy is this? And that's what Trump said in his speech, and he's right. He's right. A banana republic is what that is, Mr. Trump. That's the definition of a banana republic, when the ruling party goes after the opposition parties, or the opposition, the number one opposition candidate. So in this clown world, two clown worlds, which I'm sure everyone has read about or has seen. Well, I hope the one clown world you did not see, but it was the Democrat staffer, and he was doing the dirty inside of the Senate. And now it looks like he may face criminal charges, and that video went viral. It was pretty much everywhere. And this wasn't like in the bathroom of the Senate. This was like in the room where they have Senate hearings. So, I mean, I'm not even going to get into the details of this clown world, but it's without a doubt a clown world, that's for sure. And then we have the holiday-themed video that the Bidens put out, which was, I think it was a progressive, like modern take of the Nutcracker. But boy, did it go wrong, and everyone is mocking that holiday video from Joe and Dr. Jill Biden. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Duran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, ODYSEE, BitChute, Telegram, Rockfin, and Twitter X. And go to the Duran shop. 20% off. Use the code TheDuran20. Take care.